governor, it didn't play a role with me because you have to have a long-term vision, I believe. And that was my case. I only did one term. It was kind of funny, Tabitha, that you bring that up. I put in the light rail, the first mass transit system in the state of Minnesota, yet by the time it was completed, I was out of office. Well, guess who gets to dedicate it? The very Republicans who now had a Republican governor following me, who were the ones that Major League opposed it. So the people who opposed it vehemently, that fought against the whole thing, were the ones that then went and cut the ribbon. And I remember all they sent me was one ticket to ride it, not even one for the First Lady to ride along. So I politely declined and didn't even show up for it. But I didn't care. You have to have a vision like that, and you have to look far into the future if you really, truly want to be a leader and do things. You do them not to get credit for it. You do them, and years down the line, you look back and smile and feel very gratified, like I do with the rail system today in Minnesota, that if it wasn't for me, they wouldn't have it. And I feel very good about that. We fought the fight, we got it done, but it's very difficult. In fact, when I was trying to sell it to the Republicans, I tried to sell them over the fact that it was going through a neighborhood called the Phillips neighborhood, where 70% of the people, 80% of the people there don't even own a car. Wouldn't it be good to have them have transportation? They could get jobs and possibly get off welfare. The response given back to me was this: I don't care about them. I don't have anyone elected there. See, they only do infrastructure projects where they can benefit politically from it. They don't do it like I stepped back and said, I thought when we got elected we were supposed to work for the good of the state, not for our political parties. But with the Democrats and Republicans, it don't work that way. Party comes first, donors come second, and the people might be third.
You know, it's interesting when you talk about, massive state projects and funding. Cities, it seems, will argue for years that they can't afford to update their public transportation due to funding, yet will put upwards of $250 million into subsidized sports stadiums that they say will inject jobs and money into the local economy, but rarely ever do in a real significant way, studies have shown. For one, because the owners of the team and stadiums make a lot of money, but that just doesn't translate into increased tax revenue for the local economy that paid for it. What is the danger of continuing to pump public funds into things like sports stadiums as opposed to bridges and infrastructure?
Well, the danger is society itself. Let's face it. In the United States today, we are an entertainment-based society. People will give up the quality of life as long as they receive their entertainment on the weekends. They'll walk to work as opposed to riding a light rail system. But don't take away my pro football team on Sunday. That's when I relax and that's when I'm entertained. If you look at the psychology, we're following the Roman Empire because that's what happened back then. And if you divide the day into 8 hours of work, 8 hours of sleep, and 8 hours of where you fit your entertainment. Well, that part has become the most important thing today, not the sleep and not the work, the entertainment. And it's a culture thing. And we have to get over that. We have to realize that infrastructure needs to be attended to, and there has to be other ways to build these stadiums for the billionaires and the whole thing. I mean, I'm offended. My tax dollars went to pay for a major stadium, and the owners of this stadium get paid money to honor veterans.
Yeah.
They have to get paid at this public stadium to honor veterans. They're paid. Mm-hmm. I'm outraged over that when it's our money that built them their stadium in the first place.
Exactly, exactly.
A lot of people talk about how how the economy and infrastructure are so intertwined, and how we have certain issues with trade and the economy that could actually help infrastructure. Standards & Poor's actually came out this week with a plan to fund infrastructure and what the American Society of Civil Engineers says we need. What it would be is allowing American companies to bring home some of that money that they've been stocking away or in sheltering overseas and bringing it back at a much lower tax rate in exchange they would have to put 15%, at least 15% of that money that they're bringing back into infrastructure bonds. It could at least in theory create funding and increase tax revenue because eventually people would start bringing this stuff home. You've had some experience dealing with trade issues and infrastructure. And so I want to ask you, do you think this is a valid idea to explore?
I think it's something absolutely that should be explored. It should be looked at. But I'll tell you what I'd like to see more so. Let's take care of our own backyard. Why do we spend the obscene amount of money on defense that we spend? The United States spends more than the other 25 leading countries on defense combined, and 24 of them, I believe, are supposed to be our allies. If we would get out of these stupid wars, we would have all that money to fix our infrastructure, to fix our own country. And I think that deserves a priority more than fighting in the Middle East. I know that's a little strange and off the subject, Tabitha, but it's one that's near and dear to me. I can't stand to see all this money being spent on missiles and jet fighter planes when we've got bridges collapsing into rivers and we got a highway system that's deteriorating right in our own backyard, and we're worried about fighting wars halfway around the world that don't affect half of us in any way, shape, or form.
It's interesting that the government will spend so much money, building factories to make bombs that are only used one time, that destroy bridges and tunnels and buildings, than opposed to putting people to work actually building bridges and tunnels and trains. It's pretty interesting, that interesting dichotomy. Let's go to the private versus public debate, because libertarians would say that infrastructure projects have historically been in the hands of federal and state governments, but libertarians and others would say that there's got to be some level of privatization, like what NASA did with companies like Elon Musk's SpaceX. Do you think that there's a way for both private and public to be able to fund infrastructure in this country together?
I don't believe so, because infrastructure provides a service. And that service has to be available to everyone. When you build a highway or you build a bridge, I remember when I first took office, I started talking about my transportation initiative, and the libertarians were there and started to boo me. And I looked at them and I said, well, you don't think government should be involved in transportation? They go, no. And I looked at them and smiled. I said, how'd you get here today? See, the point is, it has to be done for the common good. And if you privatize everything, like if you privatize a highway and build it that way, you're going to have a toll every 500 feet. Because every person that owns it's going to want to make money off it. Certain things can't be used as money makers. Certain things have to be used as services to provide for a culture and to raise everybody up in that culture so that we all get a fair chance. And I believe transportation and issues like that should be paid for by government, because it is then there for everyone to be able to use it. If you start privatizing, it'll go just the way private prisons have gone. It'll require them to be full of inmates so the corporation can pay its stockholders and owners of the corporation and all that, shareholders. You got to remember, government is to provide services. Corporations are to make profit. And some things you should not bring profit into the picture.
Great point.
I have to agree. And this is one of those situations where it's getting to the point where unless we start cutting money from somewhere else, we're just not going to have the money to do the things we need. And I thank you for being one of one of the politicians who actually did push through something as important as infrastructure, which is a cause that's really close to my heart and really important to me.
Tabitha.
Yes.
Tabitha, how about let's cut war?
Yes.
I like that. Less war, more roads.
Let's cut war.
Yeah.
Let's cut war, and we can take the savings from the war and we can fix the infrastructure of the United States of America. I would rather do that than what we're spending it on now.
Well, always a pleasure to have you on, Dad. Always, always, always. Take care of yourself.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You too. Keep up the